So I was on a website recently, and it was people talking about how they became atheists. So they stopped believing in God, and what were the experiences that triggered their desire, or their unbelief. And one of them said this. He said, I was raised in a strict Catholic family, but when I was 18, I came to reject religion. Here's what he said. I needed empirical evidence, and there simply was none. None. No evidence for God. Wow. I'm not sure what this young man was exposed to that caused him to come to the conclusion that there is no evidence for God, but that is certainly not the same conclusion that many other scientists are coming to. Matter of fact, if you want to take a look at it, you can simply go to this website, dissentfromdarwin.org. So the people who signed this dissent document online have to have a PhD. So you're talking about scientists who have achieved this super high level of academic success. Here's what the dissent says. We are skeptical of claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged. So in other words, so this 18-year-old said, I gave it up because there's no evidence. But the reality is what all these scientists are discovering is there's so much evidence that can't be explained by Darwinian evolution that they're saying, listen, we need something new because we can't explain what's actually being discovered in the world around us. As science and technology get better and better, and our knowledge of the universe gets better, it becomes incredibly hard to believe that all of this just happened by time and chance. Now, I said this last week, I'm going to say it again this week. If you came here today hoping that I would be able to prove the existence of God, I'm going to fail you. All I can do is present evidence, which I said last week, is I want you to think about the fact that you're serving on a jury. In a jury trial, as you all know, they don't actually recreate the crime, right? You can't. Instead, what they do is they stand in front of the jury box and they present evidence that points in the direction of either innocence or guilt. So that's all we're doing today, is we're presenting some evidence that points in the direction of, is there evidence that points in the reasonableness of our faith in God? That's all we're going to be talking about today. So I told you last week too, when I started this part of this 2-week series, that I'm not a scientist. So I am stepping outside of my field of expertise, right? I'm not a scientist. I don't have a PhD. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a physicist. I'm not a cosmologist. So there are scientists who know way more about this. So I will be showing you more videos today than I've ever shown in the history of this church, because I need you to hear from the scientists themselves why they are struggling to believe that an atheistic model will fit the evidence of the world around us, okay? So that's what you're in for, and you're like, okay, hold on, buckle up, because we got a lot to get through today. We're in a series we've called Doubting God, and we started last week talking about what evidence is there that God exists, so this is part 2 to that evidence. So I want to ask you to open up your program, take out the notes you'll find inside. If you want to grab a pen or just a little bit of information write down today, not very much. But for those of you who are watching online, if you're sitting here going, wait, this is part 2, I missed part 1. The good thing for you watching online, you can just hit pause, go back and watch part 1 and then come back to part 2. For the rest of you, you can't pause me. So you can either, you'll just have to get caught up if you missed last week, and I really encourage you to. But I'm going to give you a little bit of summary of what we covered last week, so at least you're not missing out on some of the pieces that I might talk about today. So on your notes, then it's all filled in for you, part 1 and 2 from last week we covered. We talked about the evidence that something caused the universe. So we now know that the universe had a finite beginning point. So we know that. So then the cosmological argument comes into place. Everything that has a beginning has a cause. Everything. So the universe has a beginning, therefore the universe has a cause. And we talked about this last week. So we know this. The universe has a beginning. The universe is not eternal. It had a starting point. I was reading more about this last week. Einstein, when he discovered the theory of relativity, tried to change the outcome because he was so uncomfortable with the idea that the universe has a beginning, because if you have a beginning, you have a cause. And before Einstein and the theory of relativity and all the discoveries that came after him, the universe was always thought to be eternal. So we talked about this last week. It's critical that you understand the universe has a beginning, because everything that has a beginning is caused. what caused the universe to come into being. But more than that, I said last week, something brought dead things to life. And this is where I'm so grateful for one of the church tenders who was here last week, because afterwards came up to me and said, Brian, it's not exactly right that something brought dead things to life. Because a dead thing is something that was alive and died, right? That's not actually what happened. Oh no, what actually happened is way more complex than the way I was describing. So I'm so grateful somebody pointed out the inaccuracy of my words. That's the wrong word. Here's the right word. Something brought non-living things to life. They had never been alive. And then all of a sudden, they were alive. Something brought non-living things to life. That's way harder than bringing something back from the dead, which is also really hard to do too, right? So we covered this last week because I wanted to really give kudos to the person who pointed out the error of my words. It's not dead things, it's non-living things. And then we also talked about this one. The fine-tuning of the universe is so precise that there are all these specific measures. On the low end, 33 is what I remember of these factors that have to be precisely set in order for life to exist anywhere in the universe, and they all just are, lucky for us, are all exactly at the only spot they can be for life to exist anywhere in the universe. So it's such a compelling argument that there was a very famous scientist that I have never needed to write his name down. Okay, I think it's Fred Hoyle, but now all of a sudden that doesn't even sound right, but he was a very famous atheistic scientist who taught on this, and he helped discover some of these fine-tunings of the universe, and the more he discovered, the more he literally went from atheism to a belief in a God, because there's no way this could happen by chance. There's no mathematical way it could come into existence and be this fine-tuned. One of the theories that I read last week, and I mentioned it last week, is one of the things that they think scientists who don't reject the idea of God believe is that maybe we'll have a time machine in the future, we'll go back and set the fine-tuning, which is, of course, I watched Back to the Future. I know that's a contradiction. You can't do that, right? So it's just more and more outlandish ideas to try and explain the evidence of what we see. And now to do justice, we had to turn this into two-part, because here's the real, to me, the mind-blowing evidence is when you start looking inside a living body, and you see inside of us this unbelievable complexity. And we're going to talk about three aspects of this. They're all written down, so you don't really have anything to write after that point unless you want to take notes or write any questions down or errors that I deliver. So let's talk about three different things. So first is the presence of sophisticated machines performing specific functions in every cell of your body. This is absolutely mind-blowing. Matter of fact, it got me thinking this last week, and I went online and I discovered this beauty. You literally can buy a machine that will make chocolate bars. Did you know that? I never really thought about it. Even though, my friend who actually edits these videos each week, he works in machines but they're gigantic factories where he'll actually work on machines that do this. But you can buy one for your own house. That's what was mind-blowing. I think this one was only like $60,000. I think that's a good deal. Good deal. Seems like all I want for Christmas is a chocolate bar making machine, right? So anyway, now when you see something like this, right, this machine, you know two things. Someone designed it and someone built it. And it only performs a specific function. It can make chocolate bars. Can it make combs or brushes? Nope. Can it make carpet? Nope. Can it make rings? Nope. Unless they're made of chocolate, it can only make chocolate bars. It was designed by somebody, it was built, and it performs a very specific function. That's what we see when machines. And every time we see a machine, we know that somebody really intelligent built that. In this case, someone intelligent and amazing built that. So let me show you what's going on inside, and I don't have time for this point. I'm only going to give you one little piece of evidence on this one, and we're going to move on, because this is the weakest of what we're talking about today. So take a look at some of the machines that exist inside your body right now. Look at this.
Some proteins form machines, highly sophisticated machines, like this one, ATP synthase. These elaborate rotary motors are harvesting energy to power your cells. Or the kinesin motor protein. Yes, it's walking as it transports cargo across the cell. These and many more exquisite machines are operating right now in cells in every part of your body.
Now, I don't have time to go into more complex machines that exist in your body, but that walking one, isn't that amazing? It's a machine. And it was built and designed, obviously, well, we would say, obviously built and designed, an evolutionist would say it emerged non-directed by time and chance. But does that really make any sense? Because to believe this, let me jump down here. To believe that, let me have you think about what you'd have to believe. How many of you think, okay, so let's say that I talk to the board and I'm like, hey, why don't we buy a chocolate bar making machine for the church? Because I think we could use it to serve Jesus. So we talk them into this, and we spend $50,000, $60,000 buying a chocolate bar machine, and it comes in one big package, okay? All broken down, some assembly required. Every single thing needs to be put together. It's got all the you ever have something like that to put together? It's like you ever put together a grill or something. I mean, this is way more complicated. And so we get this thing, and we put it in my garage at home. And now what we do then is we leave it in my garage unassembled for 10 million years. Okay, that's what we're going to do. We're going to leave it in the garage unassembled for 10 million years. And 10 million years later, we're going to come back. We're going to walk into my garage. How many of you think that the non-living items in that box will have come alive and will have assembled themselves into a candy bar making machine that is performing a very specific function of making candy bars for us? Because if you believe that, I have some oceanfront property over by Ridgeway that I want to talk to you about. Good deal today only. Come see me afterwards, right? I mean, even saying it out loud, that's what you have to believe. Non-living things came alive on their own and then formed into these complex machines that perform specific functions inside of your body, undirected. That's the key phrase, undirected. Does that seem to fit the evidence of what we know? Do machines just pop into existence and start performing incredibly complex functions at a cellular level, undirected? Okay, so that's one piece of evidence I want you to consider. But now we're going to get into some harder evidence that, to me, it gets more complicated to believe that this happened by time and chance as we go up. So the presence of irreducibly complex systems. So Michael Behe is a scientist who wrote about irreducible complexity in a book called Darwin's Black Box. So he's a brilliant scientist. He talks about this all the time. Here's the idea of irreducibly complex systems. You have a system or a structure. It's composed of several well-matched interacting parts. Think about that thing inside the cell of your body walking along, right? It's got all these different parts, and they're all working together at the same moment. Or that ATP, I'm sure I'm not saying that right, that was spinning and pulling energy out to drive the energy of the cell. I mean, just amazing. So you've got all those parts that have to fit together and work exactly right. That's an irreducibly complex system. All the parts contribute to the very specific function, and remove one part and the function is destroyed. So the chocolate bar making machine. If I decide not to follow the directions, just wing it, and when I'm done, I've got all these parts left over, is it going to run? Probably not. It's not going to do it. So that's the idea of irreducibly complex, is that it's a system. In the book, Michael Behe talks about a mousetrap. Here's a simple system for catching mice. Many of you have used this simple little system at some point in your life, right? So it's got these simple parts. So let's say that you manufacture these in your factory and your margin is terrible and you're like, we got to cut expenses. So we're going to simplify this machine. We're going to take some parts out that are too expensive, like the spring. That's expensive to make. We're going to pull it. Does the system work if you pull the spring out? Does the system work if you're like, this hammer that flops over, well, it's too expensive to make that. We're just going to cut expenses. We're not going to have a hammer on this thing. Does it work? That's irreducible complexity. What part of that can you take out and it still does the function that it was created for? Nothing. There's no part of that you can remove and it still catches and eliminates mice for you, right? Does this make sense? That's irreducible complexity. You can only take it down. Now, you can make it more complex, but you can't take it any simpler and have it still perform the function. So that seems to fly in the face of evolution, that you have these little pieces that are built over time that build up and accumulate into these complex systems that we see in our body. So to illustrate this, let me give you an example, and I'm going to show you a video. I'll show you a couple of videos. The first one is, when was the last time you were out doing something and you cut yourself? Worked in the garden, touched a rose, and all of a sudden you got a cut on your hand or something. Maybe you're like, hey, I don't even know how I cut myself here, right? So it happens, and you didn't die. Thank God you didn't die from your cut. And the only reason you didn't die is because of something in your body called the blood clotting system. So there is unbelievable intricacy to this one system that functions inside your body. Watch Michael Behe talk about it. Take a look at this.
Here's an overview of how it works. Here's the cut from the thorn. As the red blood cells flow out, there's nothing to stop them. This does not look good for our gardener. But watch this. These are chemical signals. It's a 911 call. And here come our body's first responders. They're called platelets. They might not look impressive, but they're actually mighty morphing heroes. As they land, these remarkable transformers stretch out and begin to form a plug. They also release more chemical messengers to summon reinforcements. More platelets arrive, and eventually the outflow is slowed. Whew, it's a good start, but this barrier isn't strong enough to hold for long. We actually need a different team of transformers to save the day. The system activates another series of chemical signals. To the rescue comes an absolute marvel of molecular biology, fibrinogen. These guys do serious work, and their powers need to be used judiciously. So, at the correct time, thrombin shows up to activate it. The fibrinogen molecules then transform into fibrin. Now, watch as the fibrin link end to end to make strands, and they form a super secure mesh. This process is called coagulation. Thanks to the quick work of our elegant response team, the gardener won't bleed out, and the disaster is averted. That is, unless coagulation continues and the expanding clot blocks her blood vessel. Not to worry, other heroes join the fray. Two of the strongest are antithrombin and thrombomodulin. They switch off thrombin, and the fibrinogen is not activated to become fibrin. Later, the cleanup crew arrives. A critical component is plasminogen. When activated, it becomes plasmin. Plasmin is an eating machine. It dissolves fibrin once its work is done. Finally, her body heals the wound and the clot dissolves away.
So that's an irreducibly complex system, right? Think about what this means if you want to believe that in naturalistic evolution. You have to believe that all of the parts that make up your blood clotting system weren't there and then were there. And they couldn't come along one at a time, could they? Does that make any sense? And by the way, this video he goes on to explain, this is actually only part of what actually happens. The actual complexity of this is even more than this. And he lists all these different chemicals involved in the blood clotting system, but I'm like, this is enough, right? So let's say that there are 10 different parts, from the signaling all the way through to, all the amazing parts that go on in just making sure when you cut, you don't get a cut, you don't die. So think about what had happened. If your body made a clot in the wrong place, like your brain or lung, what happens? You die. What happens if it decides to not send the signals until 20 minutes after all the blood is drained from your body? You die. What happens if it doesn't stop, like it shows, building that clot inside of your arteries? You die. What happens if it doesn't cover the entire length of the cut? You die. And on top of that, let's say that there are only 10 parts to this elaborate system, and all of them have to go in sequence. So what we have to believe, if we're theistic, or if we're an evolutionist, is that one little part of that built, and then, millions of years later, another little part of that built, and then millions of years later, another little part. Okay, let's say you have 3 of the 10. What happens? You die. The host dies. because it doesn't work. The blood clotting system doesn't work without all the parts. Does that make sense? That's irreducibly complex. You need all of them. So what you have to believe is that one day it wasn't there, the next day it was, because all of them have to come in order to be passed along for the next, the succeeding generations to have it. It didn't exist, and then it did exist, and the system had to exist. And it couldn't have been built up sequentially because you die without the whole thing. You need it all or you die. That's pretty powerful. Where did that come from? Because that couldn't evolve. That's why you have all these PhD level scientists saying, this doesn't make any sense. You can't look at something like this and say that it evolved. It couldn't have evolved. But that's nothing compared to what's going on in the cells of your body right now. So I'm going to show you this video. It's a cartoon format, so you may think that it's, okay. Oh, yeah, we'll jump down to this. So it's a cartoon format only for the purposes of entertainment and education. It was put together by 5 PhD level scientists. And they have a whole channel called the Discovery Channel. Matter of fact, if you look on the back of your notes at the top, those top 3, actually the top 4 are all from the scientists who put this together. This is just a little bit about what's happening in every cell of your body right now. Take a look at this.
But inside of you, there are molecules that can detect errors in your DNA and much more. You can't live without several different repair mechanisms. We've only got time to cover one of the many systems, and the simplest one at that. Here's how it works. The simplest DNA repair mechanism of many is intimidatingly called base excision repair. Fixes a single damaged letter of DNA, and it's needed in every known form of life. If you had a damaged strand of DNA, first, one machine or protein enzyme scans down it and recognizes the single damaged letter. It would detach it from the DNA backbone, extracting it like an old, dirty tooth, leaving the functioning letters alone. Next, another machine detects the empty spot and breaks a single strand of the DNA backbone. A third machine then snips the DNA backbone again, removing the segment of backbone that's empty. These 2 enzymes have the ability to break the DNA backbone at will. Lucky ducky you, they only do this when needed, and at a specific site of damage. How could enzymes like this just pop up at the start of life without first destroying all of the DNA in sight? A question for the ages. A fourth machine then inserts the replacement part, an intact matching letter of DNA, complete with a new backbone segment. Finally, a fifth machine welds the replacement part to the backbone on both sides, completing the restoration. This is all oversimplified baby talk, of course. The actual mechanics of these things is far beyond what we can convey here. But all this madness is happening every day in every single one of these tiny little danger hot dogs, also known as bacteria. If your reaction to all of this isn't, what? Then you're just not paying attention. This is literal submicroscopic surgery with the added monkey wrench of the cell does not stop operating while it's being repaired. Imagine trying to repair a Jeep while it's still running. And remember, base excision repair is just one of the many DNA repair pathways, and not even the most complicated one.
Isn't it just mind-boggling? Literally, the simplest way that your body right now, while you're sitting here, is repairing damaged genes. I mean, that base pairs in your DNA. Isn't that absolutely mind-boggling? No wonder you're tired. Your body is doing all of that right now while the cells keep functioning. I mean, it's just absolutely mind-blowing. Now, again, how could all of those parts have evolved over time? That's the idea of irreducible complexity. It couldn't have. You need all of them in order for those parts to be repaired in the moment. They can't just come along slowly, sequentially. It doesn't serve any function. It doesn't serve the system. And this is just one system in the body. We have metabolic systems. We have genetic systems that do DNA replication, transcription, translation, signaling systems, cytoskeletal systems, on and on and on. And those systems are irreducibly complex. You get to that point like the mousetrap, take one part out, they all cease to function. How could entire systems have just popped into being? They could not have evolved over time because if part of a blood clotting system means you die. Part of a genetic repair system means you die. How could we have such intricate systems? Okay, so what's the evidence say? Does it argue for non-directed forces, just impersonal nature? Or is there evidence for the existence of a real God of incredible intelligence and power? Well, the strongest argument that I think is changing the game today, and why you see so many scientists pushing out, is the presence of information in every living cell of every creature on the planet. This is just absolutely amazing. So how many of you know what this is? Okay, so I see some of you saying it. Pong. So some of you are old enough to remember this. When I was 9 years old, my dad brought home a Pong video arcade, or video system. So plugged into our gigantic black and white TV, and you had two little paddles. And you just had a ball bouncing back and forth, and so you had to, align your paddle so that the ball would hit and go back. And Pong, hours and hours of endless fun. Can you imagine trying to get kids to play this today? They'd never do it, right? So here's why we're talking about this video game. When this game came out, of course, it had to be coded. This is actual coding on the left. Matter of fact, go on YouTube, you can look it up. How to code the video game Pong. You can literally type the code in and make your own game of Pong today. So I was watching some of this video. It's incredible. So all you do is you type in all that code, and if you've ever looked at computer code, anyone ever seen this? It's crazy stuff. Symbols and letters all mixed up, but it all means something. And if you code it, then you can create it. But it takes that information on the left, right? How many of you think that one day Pong didn't exist, and the next day Pong just existed? Right? The only way it existed is because some people figured out how to create the code, the information that would actually create Pong. Now, the interesting thing about this is a simple game has tens of thousands of lines of code. A simple game like Pong. Pac-Man's way more complex, right? A complex game like Fallout, one of the best-selling games ever, has millions of lines of code. Now, just for perspective, 1 million lines of code would equal a book 18,000 pages long. So what's the longest book you've ever read in your life? 300 pages? 400 pages? Anyone ever got close to reading a book 18,000 pages long? That's 1 million lines of code, and these games can have they can have over 12 million lines of code. So an inconceivable amount of information, right? Here's why this is significant. What evolutionists would say is we started with very simple forms of life, right? Simple forms of life graduated into complex forms of life. Pong turned into Fallout. Incredible complexity. The complexity goes up, not down. So the question is, where did that information come from? We know if we're going to code this game, right, we've got to actually apply the information to create the game. The information creates the game. And in your body right now is an unbelievable amount of information. Look at this quote. At the close of the 19th century, most biologists thought life consisted solely of matter and energy. But after Watson and Crick, who discovered the DNA helix in 1953, biologists came to recognize the importance of a third fundamental entity in living things, and it's information. The only way any type of life is alive anywhere on the planet is because of information. And matter of fact, do you want to know how much information you have? So if I were to say to you, where is information stored in your body? In your DNA, yep. In your DNA is the information to create you. It's not the information to create an elephant. That's in an elephant's DNA. Every new form of life has completely different information. Did you know that? It's not the same information, obviously. Every form of life. How many forms of life do we have on the planet? Millions, right? When you think about bugs and plants and every living thing, in your body right now is a staggering amount of information. Did you know that? Look at this. There are approximately 125 billion miles of DNA in your human body. Your personal DNA is long enough to wrap around the earth 5 million times. And these numbers are just staggering. That's just you. That's just the information contained inside of you. That doesn't include the information inside the DNA of a dolphin, or a turkey, or a dog. It's completely different information. To build any new form of life, you need new information, right? Just like if I were to say to you, like, here, give me an example. One of my coworkers has this idea for a brand new app she wants someone to create. And the app is a tracking app for her husband who likes to golf. And the tracking app would tell her what hole he's on, how many people are in front of him, so she has an accurate estimation of how long it'll be before he gets home. So, because she doesn't always believe him. So he may go out for a drink with his buddies. So she wants this app. She thinks it's going to be a bestseller. So the app does not exist. In order for the app to exist, what do you have to do? Well, you got to code it, right? You have to take information, add it into a program, and create it. And that's how it'll come. How many of you think that it'll just pop into being? It won't be there, and then the next day it will be on your phone. Any of you think that'll happen? Of course not. Somebody intelligent is going to have to make it for it to come into existence. So we have this tremendous problem with information because we have so much information in our bodies, in all living things. So let me show you a little bit about the problem with information. Take a look at this video.
Information in DNA is stored as a sequence of 4 chemicals. They're arranged like letters in a book, billions of them, that can be read and interpreted. Within DNA are segments called genes. A gene is the coded instructions to make a single kind of protein. A machine called RNA polymerase copies a selected portion of DNA into messenger RNA. This is the key, the digital blueprint for building a protein. The mRNA then interacts with another machine called a ribosome. It reads the code in mRNAs and uses it to produce the specified proteins, the building blocks of life. Ribosomes are universal machines because when they're given the right mRNA instructions, they can build any protein. In some ways, it's like 3D printing. Using a lot of information, good programmers can design elaborate parts. Your DNA has the information for manufacturing more than 20,000 different proteins that can be arranged with other molecules to make about 200 different types of human cells. The cells are custom made to form the tissues that form each of your organs and systems. All this uses only a portion of the information in DNA. Fortunately, your DNA can store enormous amounts of data. In fact, it's the envy of every information technologist. Nothing humans have ever designed comes anywhere close to the storage capacity of DNA.
Okay, so again, isn't that amazing how this takes place? And again, that is a very simplified version of it. What happens when, you slough off skin cells while you're sitting here, and new cells are created the whole time. So at a cellular level, you're very, very busy right now. And it's creating all of these new cells, and that's how it's doing it at a simplified version. So all the information to be able to create every different type of organ you have in your body, every type of cell, is in the DNA of your body right now. Where does information come from? That's the challenge. So take a look at this video, and then we'll kind of wrap this up here. So one more to show you about information.
Information is a message or instructions with meaning. Inside of you is just such a language, and heaps of information, not just in your brain, but in every cell of your body. Each cell has a gooey core called the nucleus. Inside the nucleus are chromosomes, tiny little spools that hold wound up pieces of your DNA. Inside your DNA is your genome, which contains your genes, segments of DNA. Those contain the information needed to make proteins, the machinery of life. Really important, by the way. DNA contains coded instructions and programmed commands that are read, interpreted, and carried out automatically by the cellular machinery in your body. just like computer code. With software, the instructions come in the form of letters and punctuation that are arranged to encode computer commands. In DNA, the instructions come in the form of the nucleotide bases, A, T, C, and G, that are arranged to encode biological commands, amino acids and other instructions as well. There are programmed instructions in DNA just like in computer code and software. Some of the world's smartest, most eggiest of eggheads agree that DNA is like a computer program, but far, far more advanced than any software ever created. The machine code of the genes is uncannily computer-like. DNA is something like the hard drive on your computer, containing programming. Life is a DNA software system containing digital information or digital code. From Bill Gates to Richard Dawkins, Francis Collins, and Craig Venter, they all agree DNA is a code. This is absolutely amazing because we know that digital computer code and software systems don't write themselves. Advanced programmed technology only comes from one source: intelligence.
And you all know that. The only way you have the software that you have is somebody created it. An intelligent mind put it together. Information doesn't just spontaneously pop into existence. That is the real question right there, is where does information come from? So in order to believe that there is no God, here's what you have to believe. If you went home this afternoon, you could open up Pong and you could actually get into the coding information. So on the left is the information that creates the game. So that's the coded information. So what you have to believe is that that information just popped into existence without intelligence, but then it gets even more complicated than that because, again, the theory of evolution says we began with simple-celled lives and expanded into more complicated forms of life. That means more coding. More information. It takes more information to create more complex forms of life. How does that happen without intelligence? Because what you have to believe is that, again, remember, in the theory of evolution, it's non-directed. There's no intelligence. So here's what you do. You open up that coding for Pong, so you get that open on your screen so you can type in it. Then you put your cat on the keyboard and let your cat start doing it. Because remember, it is non-intelligent, non-directed. Of course, the problem with the theory is, where'd the cat come from? The other problem with the theory is, where'd the original code come from? Where'd the original information pop into existence? How did information come to be? None of you walking in the woods, finding an encyclopedia set would say, wow, what a lucky thing, this information just evolved and popped into existence. Somebody cataloged information. Someone created information. Someone created the digital code. But what's the likeliest outcome of time and chance with that cat dancing on the code of Pong? Is the Pong game going to be transformed into Pac-Man, or is it just going to break? What is the most likely outcome? You all know it. It's going to break. You start messing with the code of any of your programs, it's going to break. And you can open this up. There's a cheat key on your keyboard right now. I'm not going to tell you what it is in case you get, somebody wants to mess around and screw it up and then get mad at me. So there's a cheat key that will open up the code on your programs, and you could start typing in the code. And again, non-intelligence. It's always interesting to me when scientists talk about this, it's like they talk about it like nature is alive, like nature is God. Because somebody had to introduce that information into the very first living cell. Someone had to create the systems. Stephen Meyer, who's just absolutely amazing in this field, said intelligent design is detectable in living systems because we know from experience that systems posing large amounts of information invariably arise from intelligent causes. We all know that. Every single program has a programmer. We know that. So, why aren't more scientists convinced? Now, the good news is there are more and more scientists who are looking at all the complexity of human life, complexity of the universe, and they are saying, listen, there's got to be an intelligence behind this. Just random time and chance, undirected, doesn't make sense, doesn't fit the evidence. But still, you got the preponderance of scientists that would say, no, we're not convinced. Well, again, it begins with what we talked about last week, is the underlying presuppositions they approach science with, and that's this force of naturalism. Naturalism believes nature is a self-existing self-organizing system. It doesn't require something external to itself to explain its properties. And I gave this example last week. You are a detective on a police force. You get called because there's a dead body in this apartment. You go into the apartment where the dead body is, but before you walk in the door, you say, this person only died of natural causes, nothing else. There's been no murder. This person died of natural causes. Then you walk in and you look at what's on the floor. There's a guy laying face down with a knife in his back. There's a broken window with a rock on the ground. The window's broken inside. There's bloody footprints leading away from the dead body that aren't the size of this person. He doesn't even own those shoes. You mean, you got all this evidence, but because you've begun with the presupposition there was no murder, you have to explain it all by nature. And you say, well, it wasn't a murder, so it's obviously the knife. He was born with a knife in his back. It's a genetic disorder called knifeism. So he's got a knife in his back. Or, you get, the rock, that's always been there. The rock is a geological formation that grew up in his apartment over millions and millions of years, right? So you have to explain everything by natural means once you've eliminated God, rather than just walking in, looking at the evidence, say, what does the evidence say? Oh man, we don't have anywhere in the world where information arises without an intelligent mind. If you begin with that presupposition, you have no choice but to try and explain everything from natural explanations, which is why you get what one scientist called now materialistic supernaturalism. Crazy theories. Like, let's open up our comic books and see what's inside. Oh, multiverse. Stan Lee was doing science. That's the explanation. We have a multiverse creating machine, like we talked about last week, that's creating that's creating an infinite number of universes, so life could be possible. That's what you have to resort to. Or time machine. We'll create a time machine someday so we can go back in time and fine-tune the universe for life to exist. Rather than just walking in the room, looking at the evidence and saying, what does the evidence suggest? We have never in our existence seen a non-living thing become a living thing, right? The universe has a beginning, therefore something caused it. And it can't be internal, it's got to be outside of it. Something brought non-living things to life. Something fine-tuned the universe for life to exist anywhere because the mathematical possibility, they're too big. It's impossible to believe it happened by accident. Impossible. Something created machines that exist inside of your body. We've never seen a machine just spontaneously pop into existence ever. There's a machine, so we know there's a designer. Something created irreducibly complex systems that could not function without all the parts at once. It could not come to be over time slowly. And something created information that's stored in the DNA of every living creature on the planet. So what in the world created that information? So what's the best conclusion from the evidence? What I really hope is that these 2 weeks are really affirming for you in a world where you will constantly be told that you are just an accident, that you are a random, there's no meaning or purpose to your life at all, except whatever you make up. You weren't even supposed to be here. There's no cosmic design or purpose or reason for you, that you just happened to be here. You came from sludge, you will return to sludge, and nothing you will ever do will matter. I hope that evidence like this shows you all of those things are not true. There's reasonable evidence that points in the direction of believing in a personal God you can know. And beyond that, what we believe is that this incredible God not just created things and sustains things, but then came into the world and gave his life on a cross for all of us because he wants us to know him. Let me have you bow your heads. Maybe the next step spiritually is to let Jesus Christ give you this gift of knowledge. He wants to know you. Isn't that amazing? He knows every cell of your body. Nothing I said today surprised him. He created you. Every part of you matters to him. And he loves you so much that he let his only son die on a cross to pay for the things in our life that we've done that are wrong. And if you will let him, he will forgive you and come make his home inside of you. If you want that, just make that decision today. Say something like this to him. Say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. With the faith I have, I come to you. And I'm asking you to forgive me and let me get to know you today. In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this service today. We hope as a church and pray that this was something that really helps connect you deeper to Jesus. That's what we're all about as a church. If you need to communicate with us, if you go online to penuelchurchlife.com, in the upper right-hand corner is a box that says, I said yes to Jesus. It also says, please pray for me. Just click on that, and it'll take you to a place where you can communicate with us as a church. So if you ever want any of the resources we mentioned in a service, go there and let us know. We'll gladly send them to you. Or if you made a decision to say yes to Jesus or you have a prayer request, just let us know. And we're always glad to hear from the people who are watching online. And if we can continue to help you grow in your faith in any way, then we want to do that. So again, thank you. And our prayer is that you continue to grow and connect and find the true life that Jesus Christ is offering.